The last thing my mother said to me was, "Take care of your brother." I never imagined those words would come back to haunt me the way they did. My name is Elena, and until 6 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was, the dependable older sister, the one who always did the right thing. But now? Now, I'm not so sure. "You look exhausted, my best friend," Clara said, sliding a steaming cup of tea across the kitchen table. "When was the last time you slept?" I shrugged, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "Sleep's overrated when you're trying to figure out how to keep the lights on." Clara frowned, her eyes narrowing. "Still nothing from the inheritance?" The word made my stomach twist. According to my brother, Marco, our mother left everything to him. Everything. I took a sip of the tea, letting the bitterness match my mood. Marco had shown up at my apartment last week in his brand new BMW, talking about his dream wedding like nothing was wrong. "That doesn't sound like your mom at all," Clara said, leaning forward. "She always seemed so fair." "That's what I thought too," I replied, pulling out my phone and showing her the text Marco had sent me the day before. "Don't worry, sis. Once the wedding's paid for, I'll help you out with whatever's left." Clara's eyes widened. "Whatever's left? He's using your inheritance for his wedding." "Apparently," I said, forcing a smile. "You should see the venue he's booked. It's like something out of a fairy tale." The doorbell rang, making me jump. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Marco's perfectly styled dark hair. "Speak of the devil," I muttered, standing up. Clara squeezed my hand before I walked to the door. Marco burst in like a storm, dressed in designer clothes. "Elena, you'll never believe what happened with the caterers," he started, but stopped short when he saw Clara. "Oh, hi, Clara," he said, his tone suddenly cool. "Hi, Marco," Clara replied, equally cool. "I was just leaving." She gathered her things, giving me a meaningful look. "Call me later." After Clara left, Marco flopped onto my couch. God, she still hates me, doesn't she? Ever since high school. Can you blame her? I remained standing. "You did cheat on her with her best friend right before prom." Marco waved his hand dismissively. "Ancient history. Anyway, about the caterers." I interrupted him. "Can we talk about Mom's will?" His expression shifted slightly, so quickly I almost missed it. "What about it?" "It just seems odd that she'd leave everything to you." Marco stood up, smoothing his shirt. "She knew I needed it more. You've always been the responsible one, Elena. The successful one." He walked to my window, gesturing at my modest apartment. "I mean, you're doing fine on your own." "Fine?" I laughed incredulously. "I'm about to lose my apartment." "Don't be so dramatic," he said, turning back to me. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Look, once I'm married to Sophia, I'll help you out. Promise." Something in his tone made me pause. "What do you mean, once you're married?" "Oh, you know." He fumbled with his wallet. "Wedding expenses and all that. Speaking of which, you're coming to the dress fitting tomorrow, right? As my best woman?" I stared at him, remembering something Mom had said months ago, before she got sick. Something about making sure both her children were taken care of. Of course, I heard myself say. Wouldn't miss it. After Marco left, I sat in my quiet apartment, replaying his words in my head. Something wasn't adding up. The way he'd avoided my eyes when talking about the will. That comment about waiting until after the wedding. My phone buzzed with a text from our older sister, Lucia. "Hey sis. Just heard about Mom's will from Marco. You okay?" I typed back, "Actually, no. Can you meet me tomorrow? There's something I need to check." Her response came quickly. "Noon at Luigi's." Perfect. I walked to my bedroom and opened my closet, pulling out the old shoebox where I kept important documents. At the bottom was Mom's business card for her lawyer, Daniela Rossi. I'd been avoiding this call, telling myself to trust Marco, to keep the peace. But Mom's last words echoed in my head. "Take care of your brother." Maybe it was time to figure out exactly what that meant. I picked up my phone and dialed Daniela's number, my heart pounding as it rang. Daniela Rossi's office, a voice answered. "Hi," I said, gripping the phone tighter. "This is Elena Moretti. I need to talk to you about my mother's will." Luigi's was packed for lunch when I arrived, but I spotted Lucia immediately at our usual corner booth. She stood up to hug me, and I noticed the dark circles under her eyes matched mine. "You look terrible," she said, sliding a menu my way. "Thanks," I replied. "You're not exactly glowing yourself." I sat down, scanning the diner for familiar faces. "Did you tell anyone we were meeting?" Lucia shook her head. "Not even Antonio." "What's going on, Elena? Your text seemed urgent." Before I could answer, the waitress appeared. After ordering coffee, I pulled out a manila envelope and placed it on the table. "I met with Daniela this morning," I said quietly. Lucia's eyebrows shot up. "Mom's lawyer? What did she say?" "That's the thing," I leaned forward. "According to her, Mom's original will split everything equally between the three of us. But 2 weeks before she died, someone brought in a new will signed and notarized." "Let me guess," Lucia said, her voice tight. "Leaving everything to Marco." I nodded, pulling out some papers. "Look at these bank statements." The day after Mom died, Marco transferred almost everything to a new account. Then he started making massive withdrawals. Lucia whistled low. "The wedding. 50,000 for the venue alone." I spread the papers across the table. "But here's what's weird. Look at the signature on the new will." She studied it, frowning. "Something's off." Daniela thinks so too. She's having a handwriting expert look at it. The waitress returned with our coffee, and we fell silent until she left. "What are you going to do?" Lucia asked, stirring sugar into her cup. My phone buzzed, a text from Clara. "At the dress fitting. Where are you?" "Marco's freaking out." "I'm supposed to be at the bridal shop," I muttered. "Go," Lucia said, gathering the papers. "I'll look into this more." "But Elena," she caught my arm as I stood, "be careful. If Marco did forge Mom's signature." "I know," I said, grabbing my purse. "Just don't tell anyone about this yet." The bridal shop was an explosion of white tulle and nervous energy. Marco stood on a pedestal, draped in what looked like an entire department store's worth of fabric. "You're late," he snapped while the seamstress pinned his hem. "Traffic," I lied, catching Clara's eye in the mirror. She gave me a subtle nod. "We'd talk later." "Whatever," Marco twirled, the fabric sparkling under the boutique lights. "What do you think?" "Sophia's mother says it might be a bit much, but I think it's perfect." I watched him preen in the mirror, remembering how he used to play dress-up in Mom's old clothes before she died. Before Marco learned that charm could get him anything he wanted. "It's beautiful," I said. And it was. Just like everything else he was buying with money that wasn't his. My phone vibrated again. Daniela's expert confirmed. "Signature doesn't match. Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. "Who keeps texting you?" Marco demanded. "Just work stuff," I said, slipping the phone away. "Hey, remember when Mom used to talk about her retirement plans?" Marco stiffened slightly. "What about them?" "She always said she'd split everything equally. That it was important to her we all had the same opportunities." The seamstress excused herself to get more pins, and Clara suddenly became very interested in a rack of veils. "People change their minds," Marco said sharply. "She changed hers." End of story. Did she? I stepped closer to the pedestal. Or did someone change it for her? He turned to face me, his expression hardening. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," I said quietly. "I'm asking why our mother would suddenly decide to cut 2 of her children out of her will 2 weeks before she died." "Because she knew you didn't need it," he snapped, stepping down from the pedestal. "You've always been the golden child, Elena. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect life." For once, she wanted to make things fair. "Fair?" I laughed bitterly. "You're spending our inheritance on a wedding that costs more than my annual salary. Is that what this is about?" "Money." He grabbed his phone. "Fine. I'll write you a check right now. Will that shut you up?" "This isn't about money," I said, my voice steady. "This is about what Mom actually wanted. And I'm going to find out the truth." Marco's face went pale. "Get out." Gladly, I turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and Marco? The suit is beautiful. I hope it's worth it." Outside, Clara caught up with me. "That was intense. What's really going on?" I showed her Daniela's text. "Want to help me take down my brother?" She linked her arm through mine. Honey, I've been waiting years to hear you say that. Daniela's office felt colder than I remembered, or maybe it was just the weight of what she was telling me. Forgery is a serious crime, she said, sliding the expert's report across her desk. Are you sure you want to pursue this? She's my brother, I replied, staring at the document. But he stole from me. From Lucia. From Mom's memory. So yes, I'm sure. Before Daniela could respond, her assistant poked her head in. Mr. Bianchi is here to see you. My heart stopped. Sophia's father, Marco's future father-in-law, walked in, his usually perfect suit slightly rumpled. I'm sorry, Daniela, he started, but we're in the middle of. It's okay, Mr. Bianchi said, his voice tight. This concerns Miss Moretti's case. He turned to me. We need to talk. Daniela excused herself, leaving us alone in her office. Mr. Bianchi paced by the window, running his hands through his graying hair. How long have you known? He asked finally. About the will? A few days, I replied. Why? He pulled out his phone, showing me a series of text messages. Marco's been moving money around. Large amounts. My wife, she works in banking, noticed some irregularities. What kind of irregularities? I asked, my heart racing. Besides the forged will? He laughed bitterly. He's been funneling money into offshore accounts. The wedding? It's just a cover. He's planning to disappear right after. The room spun slightly. What? I confronted him last night, Mr. Bianchi continued. He denied everything, of course. But then I found this in his drawer. He handed me a passport, brand new, with Marco's photo but a different name. Jesus, I whispered. Does he know you found it? No, Mr. Bianchi said, but he was cut off by voices in the hallway. I don't care if he's in a meeting. Marco's voice carried through the door. That's my future father-in-law's car outside. I shoved the passport into my bag just as Marco burst in. He froze when he saw us together. What's going on? He demanded, his eyes darting between us. Just discussing the wedding, Mr. Bianchi said smoothly. Elena had some concerns about the venue payment. In our lawyer's office? Marco's voice rose slightly. Daniela's an old family friend, I added quickly. She's helping with some paperwork. Paperwork? Marco's perfectly styled facade cracked. What kind of paperwork? The kind that proves you forged Mom's will, I snapped, my patience finally breaking. Game's over, Marco. You have no proof, he said, his voice shaking. Actually, Mr. Bianchi stepped forward, we do. The color drained from Marco's face. You're taking her side? I'm taking the side of the truth, Mr. Bianchi said, his voice cold. And the truth is, you've been lying to everyone. Marco's hand flew to his throat, a gesture so reminiscent of our mother it made my chest ache. Sophia, baby, let me explain. Explain what? Mr. Bianchi's voice was ice. How you plan to take the money and run? Leave my daughter at the altar. Marco stumbled backward. Who told you? I mean, that's ridiculous. Your mother called me this morning, I lied, the words coming easily. She's worried about you, Marco. This has to stop. Mom's dead, he spat. She doesn't get to worry anymore. Neither of you do. He grabbed his wallet. The wedding's in 3 days. Try to stop it and you'll regret it. After he stormed out, Mr. Bianchi slumped against the desk. I can't let him marry Sophia. No, I agreed. You can't. But if you call it off, he'll know something's wrong. He'll run. I pulled out my phone, texting Lucia. Emergency meeting. Your place. 1 hour. Then we don't call it off, I told Mr. Bianchi. We let him think everything's fine. But the wedding, that's where we'll catch him. He looked up, surprised. You have a plan? Getting there, I said, my phone buzzing with Lucia's confirmation. Want to help take down your future son-in-law? A slow smile spread across his face. You know what's funny? I actually do. We left Daniela's office separately. As I waited for my Uber, another text came through from an unknown number. Heard you're causing trouble. Back off, or those parking tickets won't be your only legal problem. I showed the text to Clara when I got to Lucia's place. She whistled. Looks like Big Brother's gloves are coming off. Good, I said, watching Mr. Bianchi pace Lucia's living room. Because mine are too. Lucia brought out coffee and her laptop. Okay, sis. What's the plan? I looked at our unlikely alliance, my sister, my best friend, and Marco's future father-in-law, and smiled. We're going to give Marco exactly the wedding he deserves. 2 days before the wedding, I sat in Mr. Bianchi's elegant living room, watching Sophia pace with military precision. Let me get this straight, she said, her banking background evident in her methodical thinking. My fiancé forged a will, stole his siblings' inheritance, and plans to abandon me at the altar? That's the short version, Mr. Bianchi replied, loosening his tie. Sophia stopped pacing. Show me the evidence. I spread everything on her antique coffee table, the forged will, bank statements, the passport Mr. Bianchi found, and Daniela's expert analysis. Dad, Sophia started, but Mr. Bianchi held up a hand. The wedding is in 48 hours. 200 guests are flying in. The press will be there because of your mother's company. He looked at his daughter. This needs to be handled delicately. Delicately? I leaned forward. He stole millions. Exactly, Sophia sat down, perfectly poised. Which is why we need to be smart. A public scandal would hurt everyone, including your family's reputation. My phone buzzed, a text from Lucia. Just got back from the bank. Huge withdrawal. He's moving faster than we thought. I showed them the message. Sophia stood up again. I need to make some calls. Dad, get me Daniela's number. As they left the room, Clara slipped in through the patio doors. You need to see this, she said, handing me her tablet. Just found it on Marco's cloud drive. I scrolled through what looked like email exchanges between Marco and someone named Alex, travel arrangements, offshore accounts, plans for after the wedding. There's more, Clara said quietly. Keep reading. My hands started shaking as I got to the older emails. He planned this before Mom got sick. Looks like it, Clara replied. He was counting on the inheritance even then. The door opened, and Sophia returned, phone in hand. Daniela's filing an emergency injunction to freeze the accounts, but she stopped, seeing my face. What's wrong? I handed her the tablet. She read quickly, her expression hardening. This changes things, she said finally. Dad, she called out, her voice sharp. Your future son-in-law didn't just steal from his family. He may have had something to do with their mother's death. The room went silent. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. That's impossible, I whispered, but even as I said it, memories started clicking into place. Marco's sudden interest in Mom's medication, his insistence on being the one to organize her care. My phone rang Lucia again. Elena, you need to get home now. What's wrong? I asked, my heart racing. Someone broke into your apartment. I was out the door before she finished speaking, Clara right behind me. When we reached my building, Lucia was waiting outside with 2 police officers. Nothing was taken, she said as we rushed upstairs. But your apartment's a mess. Not a random one. Every drawer was pulled out, every file scattered. On my kitchen wall, written in what looked like red lipstick, were the words, "Back off." Classic intimidation tactic, one officer said, taking photos. Do you know who might have done this? I caught Lucia's eye. We both knew, but without proof. I'll need to file a report, I said instead. After the police left, Lucia, Clara, and I sat among the chaos of my apartment. He's desperate, Clara said, helping me pick up scattered papers. This proves it. He's dangerous, Lucia corrected. Maybe we should stop. No, I stood up, finding Mom's photo among the mess. Her smile so similar to Marco's, but genuine. Warm. He doesn't get to win. Not after this. My phone buzzed again, Sophia. Dad has a plan. Meeting tonight at 8. Bring everything. I showed the others the text. You in? Clara squeezed my hand. Always. Lucia sighed but nodded. Someone has to keep you from doing anything too crazy. That evening, we gathered in Mr. Bianchi's study. Me, Lucia, Clara, Sophia, Mr. Bianchi, and Daniela. 6 people against my brother's carefully constructed house of cards. The wedding is tomorrow, Mr. Bianchi said, spreading blueprints of the venue across his desk. Everything needs to be perfect until it isn't. Daniela adjusted her glasses. The police are ready. They just need our signal and the evidence. She patted her briefcase. All here, including those emails. I looked around at these people who were risking so much to help me. Thank you, I said quietly. All of you. Mr. Bianchi's smile was sharp. Save your thanks for tomorrow, dear. We're about to give your brother a wedding he'll never forget. As we finalized the details, my phone lit up with a text from Marco. Can't wait to share my special day with you, sis. Sleep well. I texted back, wouldn't miss it for the world. The bridal suite buzzed with nervous energy as makeup artists and hairstylists fluttered around Sophia. She sat in front of a massive mirror, looking every bit the perfect bride. Your turn, Elena, she called out, patting the chair next to her. Can't have my best woman looking anything less than perfect. I caught Clara's eye in the mirror as I sat down. She gave a subtle nod. Everything was in place. You seem calm, I said to Sophia while a stylist started on my hair. Why wouldn't I be? She smiled, but her fingers kept fidgeting with her diamond bracelet. It's my perfect day. My phone buzzed, Lucia. Police are here, undercover. Daniela has the papers ready. Who keeps texting you? Marco snapped, walking into the room. Just work stuff, I said, slipping the phone away. Hey, remember Mom's wedding toast at Aunt Gina's wedding? The makeup brush in Sophia's hand froze. Why are you bringing that up? Just thinking about her today, I said softly. Wish she could be here. Well, she's not. Marco stood abruptly, his white suit swishing. I need air. Everyone out, except Elena. The room cleared quickly. As soon as the door closed, Marco's perfect groom facade cracked. What game are you playing? He hissed. No game, I said, standing up. Just remembering Mom's favorite saying. The truth always comes out. He grabbed my arm, his manicured nails digging in. Listen carefully. In 2 hours, I'm walking down that aisle. Nothing is going to stop that. Understand? A knock at the door made us both jump. Mr. Bianchi entered, elegant in a deep blue suit. Everything all right, kids? His eyes fixed on Marco's grip on my arm. Marco released me instantly, his smile back in place. Perfect. Just sibling stuff. Wonderful. Mr. Bianchi held up a small box. I brought something for you, son. Family tradition. Inside was a delicate pearl cufflink set. Marco's eyes widened. It's beautiful, he breathed. Let me help you put them on. Mr. Bianchi moved behind him, catching my eye in the mirror. You know, my grandfather always said pearls represent tears. Funny tradition for a wedding, isn't it? Marco's smile flickered. I should finish getting ready. Of course. Mr. Bianchi headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Marco? Your mother would be proud. You look just like her. The moment he left, Marco grabbed his phone, his fingers shaking as he typed. My own phone buzzed, Clara. Package in his room, right where Sophia said it would be. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Fine, Marco practically shouted. Everything's fine. Where's my tie? The next hour passed in a blur of white tuxedos and nervous energy as I helped Marco into his suit. I noticed he kept checking his phone, growing more agitated each time. Another text from Lucia. Ready when you are. Time for the photos. The wedding planner burst in. Everyone in position. Outside, guests were arriving. I spotted Sophia greeting them, playing her part perfectly. Lucia stood by the entrance, chatting with Daniela. Everything was ready. Elena, Marco called from behind me. For a moment, he sounded like my little brother again, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Do you think Mom and Dad would really be proud? I turned to look at him, this beautiful, broken person who destroyed our family for money. I think they'd want you to do the right thing. His face hardened. The right thing is subjective. He checked his phone one last time, then straightened his tie. Let's get this show on the road. As we lined up for the processional, Clara squeezed my hand. You okay? I nodded, watching Marco adjust his cufflinks. Ask me again in an hour. The wedding planner started organizing everyone. Places, please. We start in 5 minutes. Marco's phone buzzed one final time. As he read the message, all the color drained from his face. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no. Problem?" I asked. He grabbed his wallet, his hands shaking. I have to." The wedding march started playing. Guests stood up. Sophia waited at the altar, ready. "Ready, brother?" I asked. He looked at me, then really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. "What did you do?" "Nothing yet," I said, straightening his tie. "But Mom always said the truth comes out, remember?" The doors opened. The groomsmen started walking. "It's your perfect day, Marco," I whispered. "Wouldn't want to keep everyone waiting." As we took our places for the processional, I saw Daniela slip into the back row, briefcase in hand. Lucia nodded from her position. Clara adjusted her bouquet, where her phone was ready to record everything. The wedding march reached its crescendo. All eyes turned to the groom. Marco took his first step down the aisle, clutching his boutonniere like a lifeline, unaware that his perfect day was about to become his worst nightmare. The string quartet played softly as Marco floated down the aisle. Every eye in the cathedral was fixed on him. He looked perfect, too perfect, like a porcelain doll about to shatter. The minister began his speech about love and trust, but I barely heard him. I was watching Sophia, waiting for our signal. "If anyone has reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony," the minister intoned, "speak now or forever hold your peace." Sophia cleared her throat. "Actually, I have something to say." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Marco's grip on his boutonniere tightened. "Darling," he said through clenched teeth, "what are you doing?" "Something I should have done weeks ago," she replied, turning to face the guests. "I'm sorry, but this wedding is a fraud, and so is the groom." The murmuring grew louder. I saw phones coming out, recording everything. "Sophia, please," Marco whispered, reaching for her hand. She stepped back. "Daniela, would you like to explain why you're here?" Daniela stood, her briefcase in hand. "Mr. Moretti, would you care to explain this?" She held up a document. "It's your mother's real will, the one you forged a new version of." Gasps echoed through the church. Marco spun around, his tie whipping through the air. "This is ridiculous." "Elena, tell them." "Tell them." I stepped forward. "That you stole our inheritance. That you plan to take the money and run after the wedding. That's not—" He stopped as Mr. Bianchi walked up the aisle, holding something. "Looking for this?" Mr. Bianchi held up a small carry-on suitcase. "Found it in your dressing room. Quite a lot of cash inside, along with this." He pulled out the fake passport. Marco lunged for the suitcase, his wedding suit rustling. "That's private property." Actually, a voice called from the back, "It's evidence." A police detective stood up, badge in hand. "Along with these emails we found." Clara stepped forward, her phone displaying the incriminating messages. "You should really use better passwords, Marco." The color drained from Marco's face. He looked around wildly, like a trapped animal. "You don't understand," he said, his voice breaking. "None of you understand. I deserve that money. I was always the one who got left behind, the one who wasn't good enough." "So you forged Mom's will?" Lucia called out. "Made her sign it when she was too sick to know what she was signing? She wanted me to have it." Marco was screaming now, his mascara running down his cheeks. She told me. She told me." Those were her last words, I cut in. "She told me to take care of you." "But you couldn't even do that, could you?" The detective was walking down the aisle now, another officer beside him. Marco backed away, bumping into the altar. "This isn't happening. This can't be happening." "Marco Moretti," the detective said, "you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and grand theft. You have the right to remain silent." Marco bolted, or tried to. His heel caught in his suit pants, and he went down hard, scattering rose petals across the marble floor. The church erupted in chaos. Guests stood, phones recording everything. The officers helped Marco up, reading him his rights as they cuffed him. He spat at me as they led him past. "You planned this. Your own brother." "No," I said quietly. "You did this. Every single bit of it." He struggled against the officers. "I hate you." I've always hated you. Perfect Elena. Everyone's favorite. Save it for your lawyer, Mr. Bianchi cut in coldly as they took him away. Marco's tie fell to the ground. I picked it up, the delicate silk trembling in my hands. The guests started filing out, whispering among themselves. Lucia came to stand beside me, putting an arm around my shoulders. You okay? She asked. I nodded, watching Sophia talk to the police. Did we do the right thing? She gave us no choice, Clara said, joining us. You saw those emails. He was going to take everything and disappear. Here, Daniela approached, holding a stack of papers. The courts will need statements from all of you. And there's the matter of reinstating the original will. Later, Lucia said firmly. Right now, my sister needs a drink. As we walked down the aisle, past the abandoned flowers and scattered programs, I heard someone whisper, "Best wedding ever." I couldn't help but laugh, even as tears pricked my eyes. Mom always said, go big or go home. Outside, reporters were already gathering. Mr. Bianchi took charge, directing them away from us toward his PR team. Come on, Clara linked her arm through mine. Let's get out of here before they realize you're the wrong sister. In the parking lot, I looked back at the church one last time. The string quartet was packing up. The flowers were already wilting in the afternoon sun. Hey, Lucia called, holding open her car door. You coming? I took one last look at the church where my brother's perfect day had turned into his worst nightmare, then turned away. Yeah, I said. I'm coming. The courthouse was quieter than I expected, 3 months after the wedding that wasn't. I sat in the front row, watching my brother in his orange jumpsuit. All rise, the bailiff called out. Marco didn't look at me as he stood. He hadn't looked at me once during the entire trial. Before we proceed with sentencing, the judge said, would the defendant like to make a statement? Marco's lawyer nudged him. He stood slowly, his dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, so different from his elaborate wedding updo. His voice cracked. He started again. I never meant for things to go this far. That's not what the evidence suggests, the judge replied. The prosecution has shown this was a carefully planned series of crimes spanning several months. You don't understand, Marco's voice grew stronger. My whole life, I've watched Elena get everything, the grades, the praise, Mom's approval. So you forged her will? The judge asked. She was dying anyway. Marco spun around, finally looking at me. You weren't there. You were too busy with your perfect life while I took care of her. Mr. Moretti, the judge warned. You want to know the truth? Marco continued, tears streaming down his face. I did it because I could. Because for once in my life, I wanted to be the one who won. Is that what you want to hear, Elena? Clara squeezed my hand as I stood up. Your Honor, I said, may I speak? The judge nodded. Marco, I turned to my brother. Do you remember when Dad died? You were 10. You crawled into my bed every night for months. Don't, he whispered. You said you were scared of being alone, I continued. And I promised you'd never be alone. That we'd always have each other's backs. Stop it, he said, but his voice was breaking. Somewhere along the way, you decided that wasn't enough, I said, my own voice trembling. That love wasn't enough. That you needed to win, even if it meant destroying our family. You don't know what it's like, he shouted. Living in your shadow. No, I agreed. But I know what it's like to lose my brother. And that hurts more than any amount of money you stole. The judge cleared his throat. If there are no further statements, I'm ready to proceed with sentencing. What happened next seemed to move in slow motion. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. 5 years in state prison. Restitution of all stolen funds. Possibility of parole after 3 years with good behavior. Marco collapsed into his chair. His lawyer patted his shoulder awkwardly as the bailiff led him away. He stopped briefly beside me. I really did love you once, he whispered. I still love you, I replied. That's the difference between us. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Lucia pushed through them, creating a path to the car where Sophia waited. How does it feel to see justice served? Someone shouted. Will you press additional charges? What about the wedding expenses? Mr. Bianchi appeared suddenly, his PR team in tow. The family has no comment at this time. Please respect their privacy. In the car, Sophia handed me a tissue. You okay? Ask me tomorrow, I said, looking at the manila envelope in my lap. Mom's original will, finally executed properly. What about you? I asked Sophia. She smiled sadly. I'm selling the ring, donating the money to fraud prevention charities. Speaking of money, Daniela said from the front seat, we need to discuss what you want to do with the estate. I opened the envelope, looking at the figures that had caused so much damage. Actually, I said, I have an idea about that. Later that evening, we gathered at Lucia's place, the same group that had planned Marco's downfall, now planning something very different. A foundation, Clara read over the proposal I'd drafted. For families in financial crisis? I explained. Legal aid, financial literacy, emergency assistance, everything I wished I'd had when this started. Mom would have loved that, Lucia said quietly. What are you going to call it? Sophia asked. I thought about Mom, about Dad, about the little boy Marco used to be. Second chances. Perfect, Mr. Bianchi raised his glass. To second chances. As everyone clinked glasses, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Package arrived for you at the prison. From your brother. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Marco's familiar handwriting. Elena, I'm sorry. Not just for the money, for everything. You were right. Love should have been enough. Maybe someday I'll figure out why it wasn't. Clara peered over my shoulder. You okay? I folded the note carefully, tucking it away. Ask me in 5 years, when he gets out. Yeah, I looked around at my chosen family, the people who'd helped me through the darkest days. Maybe by then, we'll both be ready for a second chance. Lucia raised her glass again. To family, the ones we're born with, and the ones we choose. To family, we echoed. And I felt something inside me finally begin to heal.